we are so excited you've joined us for today's fireside session. We are so excited to have Simmons Safe here with us today. We are recording this session, so if you're watching the recording, thank you for joining us from afar. And if you're in the session, just to let you know that you can submit any questions you've got through the chat, and we will designate some time to go through those. So if any questions that pop up, I know this will be an amazing session to learn from Angela on. So please chat in those questions. But right now I'm going to turn it over to Fireside CEO Bart Yancey, who will introduce Angela.
Great, thank you. Hey everyone, thank you for joining us today. We're excited about Angela and Simmons Safe being with us today and talking about dental unit water lines. And before I turn it over to her, I was going to give you a quick update on Fireside. We continue to be just really optimistic and excited about the growth that we're seeing in our membership. We've added several really successful pediatric private practices across the country over the last couple of weeks. So we continue to grow and continue to gain buying power for our membership. And again, we're focused on private practice pediatric dentists that are growth oriented, that are willing to modernize their office and make a few changes in order to generate additional revenue and save money and become a more profitable practice. So that's our sole goal at Fireside, is to help our members become more profitable. And we're also going to be rolling out a new service to our membership over the next several months, point of care marketing. It's a new service. No one's doing it in dentistry. And so we hope to share more about that with you all over the coming months. But I'm going to go ahead really quick and introduce Angela. So she has 30 years of experience in the dental industry, with the majority of that experience in education and compliance. And Simmons Safe focuses on OSHA and employee safety, infection control, and patient safety, as well as HIPAA or data privacy and security. And they support practices nationwide and work with small single location practices, also multi-location practices and DSOs. So Angela is a perfect guest for our audience, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you, Angela, for being here today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Bart and Allison. Thank you so much. This gives me an opportunity to talk about something I'm passionate about, employee and patient safety. And our topic today, we really had planned originally to talk on HIPAA and some changes there, but dental unit waterline safety has really very quickly risen to the top of our concerns in the industry, and we're seeing more and more impact in dental practices. And so we really wanted to talk about that today, especially if you're a pediatric practice, which is our audience, or you're a practice located in Georgia because of the new ruling on testing. So I'm going to take my camera off so you can focus on the screen, and we'll go ahead and dive right into the training. So what I want to cover today for you is we want to talk about the drinking potable water pathway. We want to talk about the microorganisms that are found in our water. There's a lot of very naturally occurring microorganisms that can create a problem for us. Talk a little bit about biofilm formation, talk about the health risks that can be associated with dental unit water lines, how you implement a safe water protocol, and then I'll give you some information on the regulatory standards and guidance that are out there as well. When we think about the drinking water pathway, I think it's important to understand where does the water come from? How does it get into our offices? There's often this question of, is the water the problem in our offices? Is it the water lines? Where's the problem at? Where does it start at? And so your drinking water pathway, or the potable water pathway, the EPA sets the potable water standard. Our water comes from lakes and rivers and groundwater. And then for most Americans, our water will flow from intake points to a treatment plant. It'll end up in storage tanks, and then it's pushed out to our houses and our businesses through various pipe systems. The treatment that it goes through, there's several processes: coagulation and flocculation. There's some sedimentation processes, filtration, and even some disinfection processes that help us get our water to the EPA's potable water standard. And that QR code there will actually take you out to the EPA's website, so you could review that for yourself if you wanted. But just to give you some context, so the potable water standard is set by the EPA, is 500 coliforming units per milliliter of water. And 1 milliliter of water, if you do any cooking or baking, there's 5 milliliters in 1 teaspoon. So when we start thinking about how many coliforming units could be in a milliliter of water, 500, well, we know that in some samples that have been received, the highest number that we found is 1.2 million. And so you think about 1 milliliter of water containing over 1 million coliforming units in that small amount of water is kind of scary. So the EPA sets the maximum contaminant levels for various harmful substances within our water, within the drinking water, and that does include pathogens, chemicals, and heavy metals. So when the water gets to our homes or it gets to our businesses, it meets, theoretically, the EPA's standard. So there is this age-old question then, is it really the water, or is it something else that is within the walls of our dental practice that becomes a problem? And what we understand now better is that likely the biggest issue that we face, and what's the biggest difference in our dental practices versus our homes, it's the diameter of the tubing. When we get to our chairs, and we very specifically get to our air water syringes and our hand pieces, if you look at that small diameter tubing, it allows, so the water is not pressurized. If you think about it, water's not moving very fast through those lines at all. The smaller the tubing, the slower it's going to move. It's going to create more surface area for contaminants to adhere to and create a biofilm. And then we have these other issues. The water does not, it's not pressurized. A lot of times we think, oh, the water's pressurized in the lines. Well, it's not pressurized until it actually gets to the very end, right? At the handpiece where the air and the water mix, or at the air water syringe itself where air and water mix. That's when it's pressurized. And so that's when you would have the best chance at pushing contaminants out. Other issues that we face is stagnation, right? The water does sit, and anytime water sits, we're going to create a biofilm. Think about your dog water. If you have a dog, right, their water bowl. Think about if you like to hike, if you look at stones and rocks. If you've been in a lake, the bottom of the lake, you can kind of feel the slime layer there. So that stagnation of water between patients overnight, over long weekends, and sometimes during vacations, allows for biofilm to create. When we think about the water lines themselves and we think about the biofilm, a lot of people in this industry talk about floaters and coaters. It's an easy way to remember what's happening within the water line. So floaters are those microorganisms, the naturally occurring microorganisms that float and multiply within our water lines. And in fact, the floaters, right, Legionella, Mycobacterium, Pseudomonas, those are the most common ones, but we also find some molds in there, protozoa as well. They can duplicate every 4 to 20 minutes in untreated water. And so this is an important concept when we think about our maintenance protocols, but also very important when we start thinking about the coaters that are going to form biofilm or can form biofilm within our water lines. So this is a significant concern, and we'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about some of the cases that we have looked at, but this is a significant concern for health and safety. I think most especially, as we've seen for, what I would argue is any society's most precious asset, which is our children. They are disproportionately affected in dental unit waterline safety outbreaks. When bacteria gets out of control, biofilm forms, it coats the waterline walls, and the biofilm itself will protect its own protective shell that becomes very difficult to remove. We know that biofilm can start forming in water lines in as few as 72 hours. And it is important to note that this includes new chairs, brand new chairs. If we think about it, those brand new chairs that they put together and they sit in, warehouses somewhere before they're delivered to you, they have to go through a testing process. So water has run through those lines, the lines of those chairs at some point or another. And so when that chair gets to an office, it can already have a biofilm problem going on that needs to be addressed. So quickly, when we think about biofilm, just that mass of microorganisms that attaches to the surface. And again, within about 72 hours, we can see this. We see the initial attachment. Moving on, it starts to form its outer coat. And then we have that irreversible attachment. It'll go through some maturation. And then over time, the dispersion, which is simply now those microorganisms that continue to grow and multiply against the wall of your dental unit water lines, now is able to break loose and join the other floaters in the line. And so this is what we end up with. If we could look at this under a microscope, we turn on our high-speed handpieces, we're using our air water syringes, and we are dispersing, we are expelling those microorganisms into, and I think there's two problems here. It's going into our patients' mouths, and of course, we look at pediatric practices. You guys have some of the most vulnerable in our population. And then your employees as well, who are exposed to this. We've had some good conversations with employees who have developed, illnesses, and it wasn't until they looked at the dental unit water lines that they realized that these employees were being exposed to these microorganisms over and over again in the spray and the spatter. And again, the maximum reported sample. So we think about the EPA. What is our standard? It's 500 colony forming units per milliliter of water, but our maximum reported samples in the US are up to 10 million colony forming units per milliliter of water. So what are some of the known outbreaks? And I think it's important to note here, known versus unknown. I think that there's likely, and people that sit in the compliance space and the research space, especially surrounding water, we know that there's more cases than this. They've just not necessarily been connected. And some of that's because the onset of symptoms in all of these cases, it can be anywhere from, I think the range is 14 to up to 262 days. An average onset in that first Virginia case of symptoms was something like 74 days. So these are the cases we know about. It's the ones that we don't know about that we should probably be, even more concerned and should push us to action. So in the 2015 case, and you see Georgia is on there 4 times. In the 2014 case, there were 24 children that were impacted. And I won't give you the numbers on every single case here, but and all of the symptoms, because they really kind of, at the end of the day, it's a pretty standard list of outcomes that they see with these children, unfortunately. So 24 kids in that first case in Georgia. Most of those children received pulpotomies and extractions. Their initial symptoms, facial swelling and non-healing extraction sites. The average age of the kids in this one, I think they were between 5 and 8 years old. There was lab analysis to confirm that the same microorganisms that were found in that specific dental clinic's water lines were also isolated in these children as well. So they were the cause of the facial swelling, the non-healing extraction. Hospitalizations, IV antibiotics for these children, loss of permanent teeth, alveolar and cortical bone destruction, some other complications from the surgeries and the IV antibiotics, hearing loss, facial nerve palsy as well. In the Virginia case, well, let me back up, sorry, California, there were 71 children. We hear about that a lot. This one, in this case, this was interesting, and I think it speaks to why we probably don't know about more cases across the nation. In this case, one of the children that was seen at this practice or this group of practices showed up to a local ED with the symptoms, the facial swelling, and the non-healing extraction sites, the fever. And it just so happened that when the next child showed up, this same provider was there and was able to start connecting the dots. In that California case, this has been, ongoing since 2016, a whole lot more litigation involved in that case. I think there's something like 200, lawsuits that have been filed, and this will be hundreds of millions of dollars in settlements. In the Virginia case, this is actually close to where I live, the Goochland area. This was a whistleblower, a mom who recognized that something wasn't right, and actually some people within the practice that confirmed that they weren't meeting infection control standards to include sterilization processes, spore testing, and dental unit waterline safety. And that case really spoke more to me from this perspective of that there was something in writing, within this article where the people that were tasked with safety for the practice, and this is something that we'll talk a little bit more about, but the person tasked with safety was the person who had the least amount of experience, the least amount of educational requirements, and the least amount of knowledge, did not know that there was something that they should be doing for dental unit water safety, didn't understand the sterilization processes. And so then in 2022, I have those numbers reversed, I apologize. 2022 in Georgia, that was the 13 children who were impacted. Again, same type of symptoms. And then there is a 2024 case, and I don't have the number of children who were impacted in that 2024 case. So this leads us to then, we need a safe water protocol. And across the board, we tend to agree on what that protocol should look like. There should be a testing protocol. There should be a shock or a cleaning protocol, and there should be a maintenance protocol. That maintenance protocol is an ongoing part of what we do. When we think about testing, what are the times, when should I be testing my dental unit water lines? All new equipment. So this includes your chair, any new water lines, if you get new independent reservoirs, if you are replacing your straws, there should be a testing protocol at that time. If you implement a new maintenance or testing protocol, so maybe you've been using X product, we've been going along with this, we make a decision to switch products, or we're switching our protocol. You want to validate the efficacy of your new protocol and your new systems. Always follow the manufacturer's instructions for use. Most manufacturers agree that you should test monthly until you are consistently passing, and then you would start to test on a quarterly basis. Important to note that you're going to have IFUs, and I think this is something that, most especially if we think about dental assistants who are responsible very often for the safe water protocol for the testing, they don't know that IFUs exist. They need to know that they exist. There's going to be an IFU for your chair, and that will talk about what your testing protocol should be. There's probably going to be an IFU, or there will be an IFU if you have an independent reservoir. There will be an IFU for that. And then there's always going to be IFUs for your testing products, for your maintenance products, and for the shock products as well. So we want to pay attention to that. There's a couple different ways that you can manage testing in your office. And I think there's a great need, and there's a place for both kinds of testing, or the most common types of testing. There's actually one other one that I'm not going to get into, because it's not as well researched in dentistry yet. But we've got two basic methods. So in-office testing, which you may or may not be familiar with, it's paddles, right? One of the things that I see with in-office testing that I'm concerned about is who's responsible for the testing, and then who's responsible for the interpretation of that testing. Some other things that concern me is if you look at these paddles, if you look at the in-office testing methodologies, I don't care where you get the paddles from, they all say about the same thing. They talk about how you get your samples, and several steps in getting those samples. They talk about, how long you need to incubate. It says 48 to 72 hours. Your staff is normally going to hear the 48 hours, and that's where they're going to cut it off. One of the things that we know, though, is that the microorganisms that are found in water, the ones that are problematic for us, take 5 to 7 days to start growing. And so that 48 to 72 hours may not be a really good indicator of what's really happening in those water lines. The other concern that we have with paddles is that they're not very stable. So we don't know how long they've, set on the shelf before they got to you. We don't know if they set in a hot environment, and I think it's something like 85 degrees. If the paddles reach temperatures of over 85 degrees, it can inactivate the paddle. And so you don't get very accurate results. And then, of course, I think from a risk perspective, who's interpreting this? And then, how do we maintain this documentation if we end up in any type of legal situation? How do we present this? How do we defend what our findings were, and what our remediation was? Now, again, I think there's great use case, and I'll talk about that in conjunction with EPA certified lab testing. This is what I'm always going to be a fan of. And this simply comes down to EPA certified lab testing allows you better control and better visibility over the testing that's happening in your office. This is R2A. We call this R2A testing. It is known, this is the gold standard in waterline testing. So it involves inoculating a sample of water into what are called R2A auger plates that are designed to support the growth of a wide range of heterotrophic bacteria, including those that might be the slow growing or stressed type microorganisms. Those samples then have to be incubated at very specific temperatures. It's usually between 17 and 23 degrees Celsius for a very specific time frame. That's 5 to 7 days, and then they count the number of colonies that grow. The one EPA certified lab that I am aware of, they do this in two ways. Their counts, they still have a human element involved, and they do have an electronic method for gathering their microbial counts. So when we think about the in-office testing versus lab testing. So in-office testing, to give you an idea, so I have to unpackage each of my paddles. If I'm doing something called pooled testing. So I've got in my operatory, I have 2 air water syringes and a handpiece, or I've got an air water syringe and 2 handpieces. Or I've got an air water syringe, handpiece, and a Cavitron. I'm going to pull those samples together instead of doing single source. Single source would be the best, right? That would be the gold standard. That would be the ideal. A lot of offices, to save on costs, will pull those together. And so one of our concerns becomes, does the person who's getting the samples get equal amounts of water from each line? Because if I start filling it up with the air water syringe, which is where I'm going to get water the easiest and the fastest, and I fill up about half of the container with air water syringe, with water from the air water syringe, and then I get a little bit from the handpiece and a little bit from the Cavitron, I've already diluted my results. And of course, when you are pooling, if you had your air water syringe, let's just say it was going to pass, and let's just say your handpiece was going to pass, those two were going to pass, but the Cavitron was always going to fail. Well, I've still diluted my results because I've pulled those together with 2 lines that were, clear and 1 that wasn't. They have to then get the paddle back in without touching it. They need to flip it over. They have to wait. For the water to pass through the paddle itself. They'll see a bubble rise. They need to wait 1 minute, and this assumes that they don't have anything else going on. They're not going to get pulled away. And then they're going to have to drain the sample and then put it somewhere to incubate. And, of course, we know we cannot control the environment necessarily in our practice. Versus with the EPA certified lab testing, they gather their sample. And again, they could do it in that pooled formation, that pooled form. But again, having that conversation on the equal amounts of water is really important. So we gather the water, we put the lid on it, we drop it into a pre-labeled, prepaid envelope with an ice pack, drop it via UPS. The lab then lets you know when they've received it, when they've plated it, when it's processing, and when your results are ready. And this is why I like this. It's fewer steps, and it gives you greater visibility and control. And then, of course, your documentation is there. Now, one thing that I would say is if I'm doing EPA certified lab testing, I've got the gold standard, and I see that room 1 and room 4 failed, I'm going to go ahead and go in to room 1 and 4 and now do single source on each of my lines. And I'm probably going to use that in-office testing so that I can narrow down to which lines actually failed. And then I'm going to go ahead and shock while I'm waiting on those results. And then we'll test again and shock again until those lines are clear. Now, all of that said and done, it really could be when you go through the shock process, if you find that, man, we've tested and we've shocked these lines, 3, 4, 5 times, we may need to narrow down to what the problem is. If we've never had a safe water protocol in place before, it could be that maybe the lines themselves need to be replaced. Water bottles, the independent reservoirs tend to have a lifespan. If you look at the instructions, the manufacturer's instructions for use, they tend to have a lifespan of about 5 years. So it could be that the water bottle itself needs to be replaced. So we narrow down, right? We try the shock treatment. If that's not working, is it the line? Is it the water bottle that needs to be replaced? Now, with the shock, follow manufacturer's instructions for use. Use an EPA approved product for your shock. A lot of people are using bleach. And I'll talk about that in just a minute about why we shouldn't be doing that. But you definitely want to think about product compatibility. So if I'm using a straw, does the company also have a cleaning product or a shock product that is compatible with my straw? And this is important because what I would like to be able to do is not have to remove that straw when I do the shock procedure. But I want to make sure at the same time that if I've left the straw in place and I run the shock through, that I'm not going to destroy my straw. And think about this for a minute. How well, and we go into dental practices every day, and one of the things that we are absolutely seeing is that the people that are responsible for this process don't understand it. They're leaving straws in place and they're running bleach through those straws. When you run bleach through a straw, I don't care if it's an iodine straw or a silver ion, you are going to destroy the straw. And so your maintenance product is now destroyed, and you don't have the continuous maintenance, the continuous treatment going on in your water. So product compatibility is huge. If whatever straw you have, is there a product that also will allow you to shock with your straw in place? And I do believe that's going to have to be a silver ion straw. You can't do that, to my understanding, with iodine. Now, what's the problem with diluted bleach? First of all, it's off-label use. And we know that the FDA prohibits the off-label use of products, most especially in the medical or the healthcare world. There is no IFU that will tell you how to use bleach, diluted bleach, to clean your dental unit water lines. So this is a pretty big concern for us. It's damaging to the equipment. We know that already. We know that it causes pitting and grooves within our chairs, within our water lines. We know that it can have an impact on the control blocks in chairs as well. And then this has an effect. The pitting and the grooves and the corrosion that can be caused by bleach has an effect on biofilm formation, because now that gives more surface area for the biofilm to actually attach and adhere. And so we end up with more biofilm and higher CFUs than lower because of that. Dilution ratios vary depending on the percentage that you have for your bleach. You have to remove all parts that, from your units that can be heat sterilized when you're using bleach. And bleach is really time sensitive when you're storing it. So if somebody's diluted it, it's time sensitive before it breaks down. But within your units, we know that less than 10 minutes is good. We know that more than 10 minutes is really bad. So very time sensitive. And this comes down to, again, the employees that are responsible for it, and individual, how busy are they? What other tasks are they performing? Interestingly, if you look at the standard for bleach, the dilution of bleach for cleaning pig troughs, it's 1:16, but we are allowing a 1:9 or a 1:10 for devices that are used on humans. So it's kind of an interesting aspect as well. So again, I really do recommend, think about product compatibility. I recommend using a product compatible with your straw or the tablets. If you're using tablets, it's not as big of a deal. Recommend against using bleach, though, as your shock product. Now, maintenance. There's two main ways that you can go, that you can manage the maintenance protocol. So you can use tablets or you can use straws. I'm not going to spend as much time on tablets. What I will say with tablets is the concern that I have with it is that you have to, if I'm the person responsible, am I topping my water bottle off? And so if I'm topping the water bottle off, am I adding a tablet each time? Or am I letting the bottle, get empty or almost empty, draining it, cleaning it out, and then refilling and adding a new tablet? Because that would be the manufacturer's instructions for use, right? There's not a top-off procedure for that. What if they forget it, right? We're busy getting everything set up. I was running late this morning. I got all the water bottles filled. Forgot the tablets, or forgot the tablets and half of them. So there's always going to be room for error there. Versus the straws, which can be a set it and forget it for a period of time. And you can have those, I have no doubt, through maybe your membership, not 100% certain, but through your distributors, you can get those set up on automatic renewals, so that we get the straws at the right time, or we get reminders. So two major options with straws. There's iodine and silver ion. And I will tell you, you can find this information for yourself. Silver ion is, again, it's the gold standard. They have the highest efficacy, and they have the lowest maintenance. And so I think that really puts the silver ion straws, at kind of at the top. And these can be annual straws, which is really good. I put the straw in one time, once a year, and we're still going to do our quarterly testing, but I don't have to worry about maintenance every single day. I don't have to worry about putting the tablet in. I don't have to worry, about the iodine, which is a whole lot less stable, and can be impacted by the temperature of the water, the pH of the water, and chemical reactions like, the amount of chlorine that's in your water. Iodine is oxidizing. There is a distinct smell associated, or there can be a distinct smell and a distinct taste associated with it, whereas silver ion will not have that. And again, with both of these, you don't want to run bleach through these straws. It will destroy the straw. With the iodine straws, they do have to, every time, they do have to be cleaned each time you're testing. So removed, cleaned, replaced. So there's a lot of extra steps and a lot of concerns with stability and maintaining the efficacy of that product. All right. So as we're kind of coming up on the end of the presentation, we've talked about the safe water protocol and why it's important. We, talked about testing. We've talked about how to shock. We've talked about your maintenance protocols. A couple of things that I would add, as a note, and probably, equally important to your protocols, is thinking about, identify your champions in your office. Who's going to be primarily responsible for your maintenance and testing protocols? Once you've identified your champions, consistency is going to be the next most important element of your dental unit waterline safety process. And that's going to include consistency in training them. Make sure you've cross-trained somebody. One of the things that we see so often in dental practices is you've got that one assistant who knows everything in that office. They can anticipate every move that the dentist is going to make almost before the dentist even knows they're going to do it. They make sure that everything is ordered, and the doctor has all of the supplies that they need. Every material, every burr is always there. They make sure that all of the sterilization processes are happening, everything infection control, everything safety. And if that person is out or that person leaves, who's your backup? Who's going to make sure that the process continues? And a lot of times when somebody leaves, we find that processes fall apart. And by the time we realize that something's not happening, it could have been months or even years since the last time water was tested or autoclaves were spore tested. And so accountability becomes important as well. How are you monitoring your process and validating your processes? Training and education is huge. And, again, I spent most of my career in training and education and compliance. And I think we've done a really good job over the years of training what to do and how to do it. But we don't always talk about the why. I think, though, if we made sure that our staff understood the why is this so important? Let's talk about the kids, the 24 kids that were impacted in Georgia, or the 37 that we know about in those two cases, and we don't know how many in the third case. Let's talk about the 71 in California, and let's talk about what happened to them, right? Surgeries, hospitalizations, loss of permanent teeth, loss of hearing. These are permanent lifetime issues that these children are going to face. And it's very I cannot imagine the amount of burden that it has placed in many ways on the dental practices that were responsible for these situations. And so talking about the why with staff, I think, makes it a little bit more real, and a little bit less likely that when things get busy that they put this off. Because one of the things that we absolutely know is that when we get busy as a dental assistant, what's going to go by the wayside? It's not going to be something that the dentist can see or that's going to have a major impact right now on the dentist or on treatment. We're going to make sure that all the supplies are ordered. We're going to make sure that all the instruments are sterilized. It's the things that we can't see and that we don't understand the importance in sometimes that fall by the wayside. And so I think it's really, really important then to think about third-party assessment. We have been in over 100 offices in the last 4 or 5 months. And when we go into offices, we do waterline testing as well. And what's always interesting to us is that by and large, these offices are doing waterline testing. But we're still seeing, as other reports have shown, other research has shown, some of that John Molinari was involved in, 13 to 17% of practice, only 13 to 17% of practices are compliant with waterline safety standards. 31% of treated water lines still fail to meet CDC standards. 61% of practices have at least one failed dental unit water line every time they test. And this is really we see this when we go into offices. It's very interesting. An office is like, yeah, we've got, a great protocol in place. But there's a lot of variance. Again, I think it goes back to how well we're training employees on not just the what to do and the how, but the why. So sometimes there's some variance and interpretation of what the instructions really meant. When you have a third-party audit, you have a third-party assessment, you can have somebody that's either validating your process or is finding where you have some areas of concern or some room for improvement. And I think that's always a good thing, always nice to know, hey, we have audited this, we have validated our processes. There are some state board implications. So if you're looking at this map, we've got 35 states that have adopted the CDC standards for infection control that include the dental unit waterline safety guidance. We have 3 states that have adopted legislation. Georgia is the newest. Georgia does require that water is maintained, and I think theirs is probably almost the most specific. Requires that water is maintained to EPA standards. It requires quarterly testing and immediate remediation if the water does not meet the EPA potable standards. You do have to have, you have to maintain your documentation for 5 years. And it seems to lend itself towards that you really do need to have the lab testing conducted as well. California has some pending legislation. They're in their comment period right now. And then there's 11 states, those that are in the gray, that have not addressed this. I mean, we would still, of course, recommend that every single practice follow the CDC guidelines for dental unit waterline safety. And then here on this slide, I've just provided some information for you. Those QR codes, the first one will take you to the CDC guidance on dental unit water lines. The second one will take you out to the FDA's guidance. And then the third one is the ADA position on dental unit water lines. The only way to ensure the effectiveness of a dental unit waterline cleaning regimen is to actually test the water coming out of the unit. And then the last one is the ADS white paper on dental unit waterline safety. ADS was OSAP. If you're looking at that thinking, who is that? That was OSAP up till about a year ago. With that, I am done with the presentation part of this and am more than happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Thank you so much, Angela. That was so full of content and just full of great information, and really, I know, timely information given the things that have happened here recently. So I know that everyone who has watched this, I'm sure, has gotten so much out of it and has some great takeaways. We've got a little bit of time for questions. So if you have a question, please feel free to submit it through that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and we'll answer. So we'll give a couple minutes to think through questions and chat those in. But yeah, thank you for joining us. And as always, we will absolutely send the recording out. So if you wanted to brush up on anything, and then we will be in touch via email with the recording and then the certificates. And Angela, maybe while we're waiting for some questions, if a practice did want to engage with Simmons Safe, could you give us just a quick rundown about that process and what that's like?
Yeah, they can. I'm sure they can reach out through Fireside. You guys have some preferred pricing for us, and what I would always recommend. I mean, we do policy, procedure, and training protocols, but I would always recommend assessment. That's kind of the foundation for any compliance program, and it gives us so much information. It's either going to validate our processes and procedures, or it's going to help us improve. And that's, I think, the one thing that we see the very most, especially with growing practices. And if you have multi-location practices, it's hard to be in every office all the time. There's just no human way possible to do that. So having third-party assessment allows you to find out, hey, you know what, these 4 offices are doing really good, and we had a few problems over here, so here's where I need to focus some of my time at. So I think it helps to really streamline and create more visibility. But we do a really comprehensive review. We look at everything patient safety, everything employee safety, and some data safety that you can visualize within an assessment as well. And that includes dental unit water lines. We evaluate that for the offices.
That's great. And we will post follow-up information in the Fireside community with that preferred pricing. Well, I don't see any questions. Your session was so informative.
Yeah.
It left no questions. But as always, if you've got any, please feel free to respond via email, and I'll make sure that that Angela gets those. But we are looking forward to our next session. We will send out information about the second. Actually, let me pull it up right now. Our second session is on July 31st. So same day, same time, Thursday at noon Central Time. July 31st will be our next session with Simmons Safe on a new topic around the theme of compliance and just making sure that your practice is operating with all types of compliance and safety. So more information to come on that second session, July 31st. Go ahead and pencil it in on your calendar. But we look forward to seeing everyone there. And Angela, thank you again. We look forward to seeing you in July
Thank you.
for our second session, but we appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.